Did you guys not enjoy Hashketball back in the day?
You helped me with my Hashketball.
And you did great. I remember.
After. You're here. I did great after. Wasn't too good before. Hi, Greg.
Yeah, so we think it's kind of fun to do Hashketball now, just so you can kind of look back and be like, whoa, look how far we've come. Now we're coming to Mod 5. So this does use Hashketball. This is an app that's currently built in React. So let's check it out and try to figure out the structure, draw out the structure so that we know what we're dealing with. Got some components in here. I'm gonna let you guys lead this part. What do you want to look at to help you figure out the structure of this app? This app?
Yeah.
All right. What do we got over here?
State.
We got some state. What's on our state?
Teams and selected player.
Where's teams coming from?
Data.
Yeah, so it's actually not doing any kind of fetch request at this time because we want to keep things simple. So this is what the game's data looks like. Big old hash, it has a teams key, and it has the same old data that you guys were dealing with back when you did Hashketball. Yeah, you got your team name, colors, players, the away and the home team, and you got all the stats of all the players. And we're exporting this so that we can use it in our app. Cool. All right, what else is this component doing?
It has a function called handle select player.
Mm-hmm. And what does that do? What do you think that one's for?
It takes in a new player and then says the state.
Yeah, so we can see what the player is. Might be helpful to put this into context and look at it. So let me actually npm install, because I don't think I did for this one.
Can we read the readme?
I don't, oh, there is a readme. But the readme is create React app. And I put notes that you guys can look at for how to start up a Redux app. So I do recommend looking at the readme. A little early at this time because we're just looking at the structure of this app right now.
Wait, it's not just create React app and then
So yeah, you can look at it. This is me including some information about how to turn this into a Redux app. Or it's actually really bad practice to turn a React app into a Redux app because it gets really convoluted. It's actually much better to start off building something as a Redux app. So you can also build or use these notes for starting a Redux app.
oh, sure.
That seems a lot more complicated than just doing MPI, NPM, dash save.
Well, yeah, there's more to it because you have to also make files and stuff.
Okay.
All right, so we got this. npm start. Let's see what's going on over here. So we got Hashketball. We got this cute little nav bar here with the spinning ball. We got the two teams, the home and away. And then it tells you can click a player for details, which means that you can click a player for details. And you get to see all their stats, and you can do that with any player, right? So now it's changed. So you can kind of put this into context when you're looking at this stuff. All right. What else do you want to look at? What other components?
You have the children event, so we have a nav header and a team list.
Yeah, so if we start drawing out what this looks like, can I get a volunteer? Kenzie?
Yeah.
Do you want to? I can do it, otherwise you guys can shout stuff out. So what's the highest level component that we have? Cool. And then what's its children?
Looks like we got a team list.
So what kind of other components is this rendering? Exactly. 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 So it has 3 children components. Let's put that down. And then this state passes that information to those components. We can assume and also see in there, as well as the function to select a certain player. And that's like when you click on a player, you get to see that player, right? All right, so we got that. What do you want to look at next? All right, let's look at team list. So what's this component doing?
It's like mapping over the players.
Yeah, so what kind of props is it getting? Are you all familiar with using this syntax instead of writing props in here? So this is destructuring. So this is basically saying, all right, you're doing this weird thing where you're putting curlies. That's not allowed, but I'll accept that. That means you're promising me that this input is an object and that this object has a .teams property and a select player property. So that later, instead of doing props.teams when you use it, or props.select player, you can directly just do teams or select player. So that's what that's doing. It's basically the props, except destructured version of the props. And it's clear to see like which props are coming in. All right, cool. So what's being rendered in this component? All right, how many teams do we have again? Exactly, so we have the 2 teams. So let's put that in our structure. What do we want to look at next?
There's team.
Look at team? All right, let's look at team. What kind of props are coming in for team?
Same.
Well, are they the same? Because team list is rendering all the teams, so it has all the teams. But then we're passing one team when we're mapping, right?
And the select player.
So here just one team is coming in. And what is select player? Yeah, and what is it supposed to be doing for us?
Being able to pass off that player
Yeah.
object.
So this one seems like it's being passed down all the way from the grandpa component, right? All the way down. All right, cool. And what is this team component rendering?
Team information. Like
And what kind of information is that?
team name, colors, all the attributes that come with that team object.
Well, this is actually rendering other components. What kind of component? Player. Yeah, so right here. Exactly. So it's rendering a player. Because a team has a player's array on it. It's mapping over that. And for each player, it's rendering, or it's passing a player to the player component, and then that component renders all the information about the player, right? So we have that. What do you guys want to see next?
Player.
Yeah, let's look at player. What is this doing? Mm-hmm. And what does that onClick do?
Uses select player.
And where is select player coming from?
Daddy.
Yeah, so that's a function to find an app. And what does that function do?
Changes the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it changes the state all the way back in app. So now, since this state changes, suddenly we have a player to render, and we can show that player. So that's our app. What's this component? Yeah, this is navbar. What is this? What do you think this component is? Mm-hmm. And then one of these. Okay. And what about one of these? What is it? louder. You guys know this. Player. And then what about this component? Player details. Okay, so we're clear about how this app works, right? And then there's also the cheater method. If you ever want to just like look at what components are, you can open React. You can see app. You can see what all this stuff is. I mean,
This one. It's the target.
yeah,
You did a blog on it.
there you go. Very nice. So you can kind of like look into which component is what, what's being rendered where. Pretty useful to like get the visual, right? All right. So we're gonna actually get rid of the state and turn this into Redux. What's the point of Redux again? Manage a state. Where does it manage state? Yeah, kind of globally. I think of it more of like
Uniflow.
a cloud in the ether. It's like right here. And we call it like the Redux store, right? You know, fancy buzzword. That's where we keep our state. And we can connect the state to any component. So now we don't have to have the state here, and this doesn't have to be a grandpa passing props all the way down. You can just have access to stuff in the store and connect it to any component. All right. Let's get started. So, what do you guys think is the first step to turn this into Redux? And we gotta be a little careful here because we don't want to make too many changes at once because it might break too many things. And then I'll be stuck debugging it. So, does anyone know where to start?
Create the store.
All right, that is a good answer. But before that, we gotta install some packages to help us do that.
Good question.
That was such like
That is a really good place to start. So what packages do we need to install?
Redux.
So npm install. So there's a trick. Right now, our package JSON tells us what kind of packages we have available to us, right? We actually want the new packages we install to appear here, so that if someone ever forks this, like you guys later today might want to fork this repo, when you do npm install, you need to know all the packages that are here. So how do we also save the packages? Good. And which packages are we trying to install? Hi, Lily. She's spying.
Isn't it Redux and React Redux?
Redux and React Redux. All right, I like that. How are they different? Like, what does each one do for us?
One is just Redux, the
Mhm.
library itself, so it can be used with any language. And
Mhm.
React Redux is specific to making React work with Redux. So there's
Exactly.
different functions that
Yeah.
you get out of it.
So you can actually use Redux without React. Don't ask me how, I've never done it. But I'm sure there's other frameworks that you can use Redux with. And then React Redux is basically what helps you meld the two together. So I installed this, and it just popped up. We got Redux, we got React Redux. So I have some little notes for you. It's not coming up. Let's see. Where's that README? There it is. Yeah, so the first thing we did, npm install Redux and React Redux. And these are just like some helpful ways for you to know which one's which. So Redux is basically your state manager that puts your state out in the ether, has single source of truth, buzzword. And what Redux provides for you is the create store function. So now you have the functionality to create the store. And then React Redux is a library to help connect React and Redux together, and it provides a provider, which is like a component, and it provides you the connect function. And then there's also going to be some functions that you have to make yourself, and those are going to be map state to props, map dispatch to props, and also the reducer. So refer to these notes later when you're trying to make Redux and you get lost. I also know Mike saw a YouTube video earlier today. You have this, so you'll be in good hands. So, what should I do next?
Import, create, store.
Where?
Sure.
What does this say? What does this say to do?
Library that's state.
Folder.
Yeah. Let's make a folder to keep all of our Reduxy things in it. Reduxy things.
But there already is an index.js. So do we just move that one into the...
No, we're actually going to make our own folder. Why won't this disappear? I'm going to call it store, because that's the convention. And then inside our store, we're going to have an index.js file. Any other kind of files you guys can think of that might be useful, that are Reduxy things? Reducer, I like it. Anything else? Trick question. I'm going to make one called actions. Because Redux also has actions. You can put actions in Reducer, but it just helps like keep things neat and separated if you make a separate file for it. So in our index.js file, this is the part where we create the store. How do we create the store? Well, how do we get the create store functionality?
Oh,
We have to pull it in from a package, right? So import from where? Is it from Redux or React Redux?
Redux.
All right, cool. What else? What else do we need to do in this file?
One provider, because you want to render an app in there.
So when we create the store, we don't actually need the provider at this point. So in our index.js file, we're going to create the store using create store and export it. The provider is something that comes a little bit later. We are going to wrap provider around the highest level component that we have, which is here.
Why not do... why not
You
create
wanna-
store instead of index? It's just that index.js.
Just a convention, like it's a good place to have your store or like your store here, because what the index.js folder does, it has like the most important things, and then when you export from here, you can just use it anywhere else. And like when you import, you can actually just say import from /store, and it knows to go into a folder called store and look in the index.js file. So a lot of the time, like the most important stuff goes here. And so the store is basically the most important thing of Redux because it's everything, so it's going to go in there. But since we were talking about provider, how do we do provider? Okay. Is it from React Redux? Why is it from React Redux?
Because the set in the README.
Sorry, lost my mouse for a second.
We're
Yes.
also going to need connect.
Do we need connect
Oh,
at
no,
this
that's
point?
an app.
When do we need connect? We need connect anytime we need to access state in a specific component. So we don't actually need it here. What do we do with this provider?
Store.
Yeah, we gotta wrap our app. So our provider basically provides the store. that we're writing. So how do you wrap a component in another component in React? Because, you know, we're usually used to doing this. But how do you wrap app in it?
Just have like an opening provider tag,
Exactly.
and then below it just do a closing one.
Like this?
Sure.
I think it's like this.
Nothing that's right. You
Alright.
just have to
It's mad at me.
backspace. Yeah. Go back to the beginning.
Okay. And what do we need to give to our provider? And what is it equal to?
So we need to import.
Do we have a store?
We don't have a
Where do we
store.
get the store?
We have to make it.
We do have to make it. And we're going to have to pull it into this file. So how do we do that?
Import.
What do we need to import? Import store. It's going to be coming from this folder, and since it's the most important thing, it's going to be coming from this file, which means you could just do this, right?
So it just knows to look in index.
Yeah, every time you see something like this where it's the folder name, it knows to find the file index inside of that folder name. Okay. So we need this store. How do we make this store?
Const store equals arrow function.
Like this?
Yes. I can't remember how to use a gray store, but I guess you need to pass a name.
I think you just use it like this.
Okay. Alright. And then parentheses.
Does that look right?
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay. And what does the create store function take when it's invoked?
State.
Mm-hmm. It takes the reducer, so it needs a reducer. So my linter is yelling at me
There's no reduce.
because there's no reducer. So what do we need?
For the user from React.
We need a reducer. Where do you think it's gonna come from? Import reducer from reducer, right? We also need to export this. Why am I doing export default?
You need other files to have access. You need to be able to import it.
I do need to be able to import it. What's the difference between just export and export default?
If you do export default, that's the only thing that you can export. If you do,
I can export other things too, if I
uh,
wanted to.
Is that what lets you pull like destructor it when you import it?
Kind of. So, where are we importing store again? Where are we using it? In app?
The OG index.js.
OG index.js. Yeah, I mean it's wrapped around app with provider, that's where we have store. So when you export default something, you can import it directly, but if you were to just export it, then you need the curlies around it and use the destructuring. That's the major difference I know of. Usually the most important thing in a file, you can export default it. Alright, cool. We have a store. What else do we have?
Also, I think when you export default, you can like change that name to whatever you want.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. You can do that too. Alright.
So we have to define a reducer.
Exactly. So we're trying to import a reducer. Doesn't exist yet. So we gotta make this reducer, right? This is where we're gonna have our reducer.
I think it's good the way it is.
So we gotta export default a reducer, right? It's going to be a function. Actually, export default doesn't really like functions, I don't think. So let's do it this way.
It works, yeah.
Alright. What does the reducer function usually take?
State action.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah.
That's pretty good. And what does it do?
Well, it has like a type, which is like what we're used to refer to it as,
What has a type?
like an action.
I thought I saw you mouthing it. Action is the thing that has a type property on it.
Yeah.
Okay. State, though, usually needs some kind of initial state. Otherwise, it's going to be undefined and things are going to break. So we have to define an initial state and give it some kind of thing, right?
Can we just import the game data?
I mean, you can do this. I like that idea more. We can define an initial state here. So how do we do this part? State is just an object, right?
Yeah. I mean, can we import the same way you were doing state before you imported that team's data?
We can.
You can just import team's data into that file.
So what did our state look like on app.js? Does anyone remember what kind of things were on it? Teams and a selected player. Yeah, so we still need this. So we gotta import this. Where's this coming from again? Game state. Alright, so it's coming from here, we're in here. So we gotta step out.
So if you're fetching and you want your initial state to be the data that you're fetching, do you need to do your fetch here? Your store?
So fetches are a little more complex. You need to involve thunks when you do fetches. So we're not going to go over this in too much detail today. That's something you're going to be covering next week. So for now, we're just working with an object that already exists and is defined here and not like fetching from a database. All right.
I think it's games.
What's the problem?
It's games data.
Ah. Thank you, Jackie. All right. So what does the reducer usually have in it?
Switch.
Do we also have to set state equal to initials?
We do, otherwise this would break. How does a switch statement work? What's the syntax for the switch statement? And then?
Hit enter.
Parentheses. An action.
Honestly, it doesn't work on my computer.
Oh,
Is it just this? This is one of those things that I always look up. JavaScript switch statement. You need curlies, right? And then you have your cases, right?
And below it, you have your default.
Yeah, so we're gonna have some certain case, colon, and default. So for now, we just have a default, and that's fine. What does our default do?
State. Return state.
This ain't Ruby. You can't just say state. You gotta return your state. Alright, cool. So what is it going to return right now?
To return teams and the selected player.
It's going to return this entire object as state. Alright. We're getting places. Definitely getting places. So where are we using the teams. Like, which component needs it? Maybe now is a good time to like start connecting it.
Teams.
What was the question?
Where are we using the teams data? Like, why do we care about having this in the state? Like, which component cares about this data? Team list definitely cares about it. Is there any other component that's using teams? Is this one using it? This one's just passing it as props. So now, we don't need to do this.
Wait,
Uh-oh.
what did you just delete? I missed it. Oh.
So the goal is, we are going to break things. We're going to disconnect teams from this state. Goodbye.
Yeah, just get it out of here.
Go to review.
Just delete all of it.
For now, let's just break one thing
No,
at a
let's
time.
just break it all.
We don't need that.
And then we're not going to pass it as props anymore.
Some more this time.
Team list, you're on your own. Alright. Team list uses teams. So how do we give it the teams from our Redux state?
Get state. Oh, we got a dispatch, right?
Kind of.
Just don't worry.
Connect.
I like that.
Say it again.
What do I do with connect?
Connect.
What's connect for?
Why? That's the problem that I had. That's why I didn't pass. Why are you making me explain?
What does connect do?
So it's gonna connect.
Yeah.
It's gonna connect your store with you.
It connects this component
Can you say this?
this
Can you say
store,
that?
right?
Huh?
Can you say that?
Alright, so guys, if we're trying to use connect, where's connect coming from?
You're racist.
It is.
You said connect and then reminded me of it.
Yeah.
It's coming from React Redux. How do we use connect?
I didn't do that.
We have to do like a connect parentheses, like it's the one with two parentheses, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And do like a map state to props. As one
Where am I
argument.
exporting this? Stop. Why won't this thing go away? Hang on. Ooh. Okay, so usually you can do it here. When you export default this component, you can export default like a connected version of this component to the state. So you can actually do it here.
Parentheses and then two parentheses.
So connect is a function. What does it take as its arguments?
Map state to props, yeah.
Map state to props, yo. It actually takes two arguments.
And then you have to give
It takes another one, but it's optional.
Oh, no.
You don't have to put null. If you're just not gonna use the second argument, you don't have to put null. The second argument it could take is map dispatch to props, which we'll get into a little bit later. What map state to props does, it allows us to read the state in our store. Map dispatch to props allows us to send actions to change the state in our store. But right now we're just trying to read the team data. So for now we're just going to use map state to props. But that means we have to define map state to props, so keep that in mind. What about the second invocation? Because this thing will return a function that needs to take something here. So what goes in the second set of parentheses? What did we have before I started changing this?
Team.
Team list.
Oh, yeah.
I told you guys we gotta
Yeah,
use
list.
connect to export a connected version of our component to the store. So we still have to include team list. It still needs to know like what component it's connecting. So that's like in the second set of parentheses. As you can see, my linter is yelling at me because map state to props is not defined. So we need to define map state to props. What is map state to props again?
Get state. It's like
That's what it
they're gonna
does.
be props now.
All right. Answer I was looking for is that it's a function. What does map state to props take as its argument? State. And what does it return?
Parts of the state that you want. Parts of the state that you want.
And what part of the state do we want?
The one team is part. The team part. What attribute was it called? The team.
I think it was called teams. We can double check. It's called teams. So we care about this part. So right now, this lives on state. State.teams will give us this, right? Where were we? Team list. Okay. I can write a key here. What does that do for us? I can write like a key here. I can name this part whatever I want. So if I name this whatever I want, where do I access that? So it has to do with props. So the whole point of this function, map state to props, is it's putting whatever I'm putting here on props. So if I'm defining this as teams, that means now I have access to the key teams on props. I can define this as beef, and then I'd have access to props.beef, and we'll give it this.
What would be your value?
That's my next question.
Is that state of teams or something?
Yes, so state is that state object that we have in our store. And what property on state do we care about? Teams.
Does it matter if we do it as not an arrow function?
Shouldn't matter.
So it just knows, like, map state to props, like that function specifically knows what state it is.
Yeah, because connect connects us to the store. Connect takes in map state to props.
So like you wouldn't be able to, if you were like defining like a custom function, you can't just give it state plus. Like you already defined what state was. Like that specifically map state to props.
Yeah.
What gives you state.
Yeah. I mean, if I wanted to, I could take this off. And then I just have the entire state object.
Yeah.
But that's no use to us. All right. Fun question for you guys. Why is my linter yellow?
Before we do that,
Yes.
we need to switch characters.
Okay. Is this one mine?
This one's mine, but this one's Ava's. She needs it.
So, have you guys thought about why my linter might be yelling at me at this point in time? I'm doing something wrong.
And then it's like speed and square bracket.
This? Teams? Like this?
Supposed to be into the left.
No.
Is this supposed to be a square bracket when it's not an arrow?
Alright, let me ask you guys this.
What's the linter say?
Well, I don't want to give that away too much. Fine, let's see what it says.
Defined but never used.
Okay, that's tricky enough. That's tricky enough to keep you stuck.
So,
Not used.
What is my function returning?
Oh. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
It's not returning anything. What should it be returning?
An object.
It should be returning an object. So I'm trying to do the whole like arrow function thing with the one line, but you can't do that with objects because it's gonna think that you're opening a function block and that you're writing stuff here. So if you want to do the one-line arrow thing with an object, you have to wrap your object in parentheses. And now it's still doing the implicit return, and it's returning this object. Otherwise, if I didn't wrap it in parentheses, I would have to say return curlies to like make an object, and it would have teams state.teams.
There's still
Hmm?
the linter is still there.
Well, it stopped yelling at me.
Isn't the red dot still next to it?
This is a GitHub thing,
Oh, okay.
I think. There is a fun thing you can do. There's a fun thing you can do, which I will show you guys, but I don't expect you to ever use this, and I think it's personally too confusing to use. You can actually do something fun like this.
That doesn't look fun.
Oh, it's just destruct.
You can destructure
Just use the word teams.
and then just use the word teams here. You can do this fun thing
That looks so much
because
nicer.
it's JavaScript.
Yeah.
But it's way too much ES6 going on. What is this doing?
It's like double syntactic sugar. It's like double dose.
So what is this doing for us?
It's destructuring the state object, so it's
Right.
telling us that we just want the teams.
Exactly.
And it's setting that it's making a new object from
Yeah.
that object.
This is like saying, oh, you're doing that weird thing with the curlies? That means you're passing in an object that has a team's property on it. So I'll let you do that, and then you can use just the word teams later on to refer to that value. And then this is basically a shortcut for doing that, right? Because now you have a key called teams, and then you're using a variable to set its value that's somewhere within the scope. So you can do this fun thing, right? But it's a little too confusing. That's just fun stuff. Let's stick to this. All right. So now we've mapped state to props. Will stuff work now? Why not?
Except this. Alright. Export.
What's going on here? What am I missing? Export default reducer. Cool.
Cars don't work.
So, shit still works. Why is it working? Well, what did you guys think that was like missing that we still didn't do?
Oh.
We didn't do any of the dispatch stuff.
We don't need to do dispatch stuff
I don't know.
because we're just getting teams, right? Our teams live here. We're not doing that thing where we're starting off as an empty array. We're actually starting off with real data. We've connected to the store. We've mapped this to props. And remember this fun thing where we had props coming in and we said that there's already a teams key on the props? So now props are actually coming from here. They're no longer coming from the higher level component.
So where's selected player coming from?
Selected player is still this part.
Still coming from that.
This is still coming from app. And you can do this. You can mix React and Redux like this and still pass props from a higher level
Oh,
component.
we didn't delete that component.
Yeah, we haven't gotten rid of this part. And this is actually a function. This is not even that one selected player that we used to have.
Didn't we have the map?
It's not referring to this. It's referring to this, which is the functionality for clicking on a player and showing the stuff, and we're passing selected player all the way down. So we're not even really using it in Teamless. We're just passing it.
I thought you deleted this earlier. My bad.
What I deleted was the teams being passed down.
Yeah.
Alright. What should we do next?
Well, we don't need that selected player object. A state. We only need it in. Well, we're only defining the on-click in player,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe.
Yeah, so we need a way to change the selected player. And we want to use the selected player in the store, not the selected player here. And our selected player starts off as null. We want to change it to an actual player. So what do we need to do? Shall we look at the notes? Anything useful here? Well, okay, so we made our reducer file, right? We put some stuff in it. We put an initial state. We exported a reducer function. This is something that we put in our actions.js file. Actually, we haven't done this part yet. But you can define action types in your actions.js file, and you can define action creators. What do action types do for us?
It's just like a set of instructions. It's like,
Kind of.
Tell us a reducer.
Yeah, exactly. So our reducer right now just has a default. Action types give us the functionality to like do other stuff. So this is us telling our state, hey state, we want to change you in some way. So in which way do we want to change our state?
we want to change the selected player.
Yeah, we want to change this from null to an actual player. So that means we need an action type that allows us to change the player, right? So I would name it select player because we're trying to select a player. Some good practice that I learned, other than just doing it here. What's the syntax for this? Is it case?
Yeah.
You can do it this way and define what it does. But strings are not very strong, so it's usually better to make this a variable. And since we have a very useful file for actions, we can make the variable here. Because now we can just always use this variable, and if we accidentally misspelled this, if we were always using this and we like left out the E, things wouldn't just be broken. But if we misspelled this, it would tell us, hey, that variable doesn't exist, and it would yell at us. So this is actually like the good practice. We do want to export this. So we're exporting this from actions, and we can use it here. Where is it coming from? Actions. Why do I have the curlies around it? Yeah, because I didn't export default this one. There's going to be other stuff I might want to export. So now here, I can use select player. What do we want to happen when we select a player? Exactly. Yeah, we want to change this part from null to whatever player, right? And where can that player be found? Because I can't just do like return state. How would we actually do this part without mutating state? How would we change the state without mutating? Yeah, so we're copying state, and which part are we trying to change? Yeah, so it can overwrite this. But back to my original question. What do we put here? Like, we can't just put player. It's going to be like, yo, you didn't define player.
Select player.
Somewhere at some point we have to pass in player. We actually have access to the information we need somewhere in here. Where does it live?
Teams.
Hmm?
Teams.
Well, we don't have access to teams here.
Oh.
But we do have access to this information. Where can we find it? It is on the action. What's this action? What kind of... You can use payload. So what kind of data type is action? It's an object. What kind of keys are on that object? Exactly. So, where do we define the type and the payload?
In actions.js.
Okay. What do we put here? Anyone have notes?
Wait, what is the question?
We have to somehow tell the player, or we have to like tell our action what the player is. But where is that defined? I don't know.
You like dispatch to prompts inside of
Okay, where?
inside of like the team list.
Here? So this is where we're trying to use... Actually, is this where we're trying to use select player? Or is there a different place? Where do we click the player?
On player.
This is where we click the player, right? Alright, so tell me about map dispatch to props.
You make like a function.
Map dispatch to props.
Do you need to import or not?
Yes.
What do we need to import? We do need to import
We
something.
import connect.
Import connect.
You're doing great.
I don't. This is as far as it goes.
Alright, so this is a function. We don't need to import this function. This is a function we need to define. What does this function take?
It's the same as the other one.
State?
The state and action.
No. It takes something else.
Payload.
It takes dispatch.
Ah.
This is what dispatches our action. What goes here though?
What's up with that D?
Dude, I don't know.
That's a D. Let's do that connect business. Right?
What does this return? Okay, you want to do the connect now? We can do the connect.
That's the only thing I know how to do.
Alright, how do we do this part?
Same thing we did the other.
How do we do the other one? We did map state to props.
Well, can't do that.
Yeah, so this won't work.
I need to map dispatch products.
Where does that go? Instead of this?
Yeah, so that.
Well, not so fast.
Put a nice note before it.
Nice kind of music, and they don't like it.
Getting there.
That's not my problem.
Okay. Alright, so we've imported connect. What do we need to do here? What do we need to return?
A function for that on click to use.
Yeah, well, we actually do need to return an object.
The player object is what we want to return, right?
Is it? We want to return an object, so let's do this trick. What does map dispatch to props do for us? Think about the name of this function. Map
What does
dispatch to
mean?
props.
Is it giving like the function as a prompt to them?
Exactly. So that's where like map state to props and map dispatch to props are same but different. They're like similar but different. Map state to props gives us something on our props that lets us see a part of the state. Map dispatch to props gives us a function on our props that we can access to then go change the state.
So it's like one of them brings it down from state, and the other one gives it back to state. Or like
Exactly.
changes
One
state.
is like a getter, you can read the state, and one is like a setter. It tells you to like go change the state. So what should we call the function that we're gonna use? Select.
Should we delete the one that's being passed down like that?
Here? Well, if we're mapping this to the props,
Oh, it overrides it, I guess.
this will live on the props.
But do we need it to still be defined?
I think you still need it, yeah.
So then what's
I
the
don't
point
know.
of doing
You
this?
can try to experiment with that. I haven't tried deleting it, so
Okay. We should try it after.
we should. We should see what happens. So, how do I write this part?
Event dot target dot value.
Can you do that here?
You said event to me.
We write a function here. What does it do?
Is this like rewriting that function that we wrote like in the other place so that we won't need it
Yeah.
anymore?
So we need a function in our reducer, not in our reducer, in our actions. So this right here, action types. We also need action creators. So we need a function here called select player, which we're gonna use. So we want to like have access to this function. So for now, let's just do some stuff. Okay. So that's where like this functionality is gonna come from. It just doesn't have anything on here. Maybe we can put a console log for now. Inside actions JS, select player. Now back to this part. How do you do this part? We gotta use this somehow.
Dispatch dot payload.
This,
I'm gonna
you're
keep
using
saying-
the
I'm gonna
right
keep using
buzzwords.
payload until it works.
Combined with what's
Okay, so payload is not where this part goes. Payload, you're on the right track. That goes over here. So like this function will give us our action back. And it'll have the payload on it. But we don't need to worry about that in our component. All our component does is it dispatches the action. So it like sends off that action to the store.
So it's a
So does it like invoke that function?
Yes. It invokes the function. What is the function called? And do we have access to it?
yeah. Because we're connecting.
We actually, for dispatch actions, we need to pull them in. For state, we don't need to pull it in, but for dispatch, you do have to actually import it. So,
I'm gonna connect it.
Oh,
so where are we pulling in select player from? Where do we define it? So here, right? Which means we need to export this. I think I could just put export here. Alright, so we're exporting this. So we can import it here. Where is it coming from? And then which file in the store folder? Exactly. So now we have access to this over here. We've mapped it to the props as a key called select player. We could change the key name if we wanted to. Like we could do select a player, but then we would have to change it here too, right? We still need to know what player we're clicking on. How can we pass this information? Yeah, so we can pass it through this way. Cool? All right, what are we missing? Like right now, will this work?
So what is this dispatch?
Dispatch is part of Redux, where it basically dispatches the action for you, and it goes to the reducer.
I feel like I don't know.
So it's a function.
It's a function built into Redux.
I feel like if we're using both, like, how is this supposed to make it easy? Like,
I don't know.
I feel it looks like an extra step to me because if we're already passing the function down like through all these things as props anyways, then what's the point of like dispatching this function to begin with?
The point
whole
of
point of
dispatch,
Redux so that we don't have to pass down to a billion different things.
dispatch kind of keeps your store pure, and it's like a way to change the state of the store, or like the state that's held in the store. So I think of it as like a messenger. Dispatch basically carries a message. Like in our case, it's like select, right? So dispatch carries this message for us. It goes to the reducer. The reducer has access to this whole state, right? This statement. State. So the reducer is like the bounce. It like stops you from accessing the state. So dispatch sends a message, and the reducer is like the bouncer. Yo, let me check what your message is. Let me check my case. Let me see if I have this. Okay, fine. You can go through. That's what that means. So how do we implement this?
Do you have to put it in this switch? Or do we already have it?
So what do we currently have in our switch?
Oh.
We have this, right? This is our message. We're missing a place where we define our action, where we say what the type is and like what the payload is. Where can we do that?
The one where we have the console.log
Exactly. And where is that?
in actions.
So, what can we return here instead?
Player. And we have to give the argument of player because we're defining it.
So I think you need type here, right? Because you're trying to return the action. What is our type? It's this thing, right? And what's the other thing? Payload? What's payload?
Change it?
It's what Mike said.
It's the player itself, right? So you guys, you told me we need a way to have the player, right? So this part, I was telling you guys, like, there's a way that you have access to this information. Actually lives on this action, right? So now we can do action.payload. I personally, this is like a preference. Type is like a convention that everyone follows, but payload, you don't have to call this payload. Some people prefer to call it the actual thing that's coming through, and I'm one of those people, so I prefer to call it player. But then what that would mean is that here, instead of calling this payload, you would have to call it player too. So that's just like two different ways you can do things. But where's this player coming from?
Don't show us.
Exactly, it's passed in when we invoke the function. And where are we invoking this function? And where is that? So here? We're invoking it here, right? We're passing it a player. The player is going through here. It's invoking select a player. And then select a player is returning an object that is an action. What's up?
Can you go back to app?
We don't need this anymore.
So since we don't
Hopefully.
need this anymore, can we just define this function in player?
We can get rid of this.
Got this too.
We can
Yeah. So
we can get rid of this. Because we
but
had
then how
this
does
here.
The onclick. Okay.
So
Right, it's-
we had this stuff up here because our state was like the grandpa passing on that function all the way down here, just so that player can change the state of that one particular player using that function that allowed it to change that state and sending that back up. But now we can connect player directly to that dispatch action in the store so that it can send a change to the store, and you don't need to pass that function all the way down. You don't even need to define it there anymore.
So that's okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so we can get rid of this. We can get rid of this. We can
So like
get
that
rid
onclick is hitting that function that we just defined in action. The one where it's
Yes.
changing.
So this right here is changing the state.
So like when that select the player,
Mhm.
it's not coming from props anymore.
It is though. It's coming from these props that are mapped to state.
But that's dispatching.
We can try to get rid of this later.
Dispatching, but the callback itself.
I think you still need the props here though.
But like, isn't that prop the function that we originally defined from app? Like that's what. select
Yeah,
the
but I
player
think
is.
you need to have this here. I can try to take it out later.
I'm just
I'm not
confused.
100%
Definitely
certain.
need that.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm just confused as to like, so this isn't what, from apping.
No.
It's from the store.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think that doing this automatically gives you props
Yeah,
without
yeah.
still putting them here.
That's why you could change. You change it to select a player because that's the way you defined it in this.
Yeah, but I understand where you're coming from. All right, cool. So our dispatch action, what does it do? What does this thing do for us? Let's trace the path again. Where does it go when we invoke select player? It's invoking this function here. Where does this go? Well, actually it goes here first, right? First it invokes this select player, which returns this action. But then it goes to the reducer. It takes in that action that has the type and the payload. It takes in a state. And based off of that action's type, the reducer is like the bouncer, right? He's like, let me check my cases. It finds the right case, and then it updates the state. And since we're updating selected player now, to an actual object, it should cause a re-render. And now we got rid of the whole functionality of like sending props all the way down and sending stuff all the way back up to state. Is there anything else we can get rid of?
So does it work? Wait, so we need a
I'm not sure that it would actually fully work right now. Actually,
you have to add
I don't think this will fully work right now because I think there's more that we need to do.
we need to let player details know about it.
Oh yeah, player.
So we have to map state to props inside of player details.
So this is selected player. This is coming from props. This is a way to read the state, right? So what do we need to do?
We need to
Give it select the A player.
Exactly. We need to connect, and we need to give it selected player. This is why we usually don't change React apps into a Redux app because it can be really painful. Even with something simple like this. So we're importing this from React Redux. How do we connect this part?
bottom, just export to default, connect, map state to props, and then the name of the component. And then define map state to props.
Yep.
And then give it selected.
What does it take?
Takes yeah.
State.
And what does it return?
Object.
An object. What kind of key on this object?
Selected.
Yeah, this is, we can choose to name this whatever we want, but let's just keep it selected player. And what is it taken? Like, what's the value?
State dots. So whatever we call the select A player, I think. Or
What did we call it in our state? We called it selected. Will this work? Maybe. There might be other pieces that we still need to connect. It's not giving me any errors. But it's also... Yeah, that's not good. No errors. The worst kind, right? We can check if this has selected player. I have a feeling maybe the function is not even firing. Yeah, I have a feeling this function is not firing.
it seems like it's not even rendering that player details page.
Yeah, so I think this part is not firing. I can check how I did it before.
So you don't have to do like props that selected player?
Why don't you come select player?
Yeah, let's do that. So you don't have to do props that select player because this is destructuring the props. So this is saying, I know that there's an object here, which is props, that has select A player.
Well, didn't we
on it.
like rename the key to select A player?
We did rename it to select A player, but we matched here. And we matched this to select player, which is exactly how we defined it in store actions. So it should be okay.
But isn't that the updated version? Isn't it now select A player? Because aren't you setting what
Yeah.
select
This is the name of the component.
This, we choose this name
Oh, okay.
in this component. This is whatever we defined it, where we defined it. Let's see if select A player works. Interesting.
That's fine.
but it's not getting invoked. There's a fun trick you can do that I learned the other day. You know when you have like a one-line return and you want to console log something, it can be really annoying because then you have to put your curlies and you have to make it multi-line just so that you can include like a console log, right? There's a trick that I learned where you can do console log here and then you put the OR because console log returns a falsy value. So this evaluates to false and then it moves on to this part so that this still runs. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know if this is gonna help. So we know this is hitting.
Yeah, but it's not firing.
Yeah.
It's not firing.
So my other question to you guys. Did we ever get rid of the state here?
Haha.
No, we did get rid of this. So this is not overriding. I can just remove it completely. But we might still be passing somewhere, something somewhere. This could be a problem. This is a falsy value. So it's showing us this. This dot state doesn't exist anymore. Selected player lives in the store. So we can give it access here. We can map state to props again if we want.
Wait, but why can't we just like give it no props since we're already giving it the prop of selected player?
So we want to have the selected player. This is coming from the state that we got rid of, right?
But aren't we getting that from?
But not in this component. What we could do is we could get the player in this component and then just pass it on React style and then not map state to props in the next component. I think we should map state to props because it's a good practice, an extra practice for you guys. Oh, I gotta say bye to Cynthia.
Love you guys. Happy birthday. Gotta get better first. Happy birthday, my guy. We're gonna swipe you in every morning. Guys, you never give or me every other. Yeah.
Alright, take a short break. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I just gotta do my mod 3 project. Alright guys, so if you want to do like a test round of feelings, we can do that right now.
How can we do that? What do you need a test round?
Take like a 2-minute break. I really gotta run to the bathroom.
Video?
Alright, JT, stop.
We need someone to place it. Legendary feeling.
I'll do it.
Redux.
Oh, do the you? I'll FaceTime.
Alright.
Bro, why didn't you give me one?
See y'all happy hour.
I feel so left out.
Come through.
Jack. Oh. I just got Mick K.
He's gonna call me a racist. He's gonna call me a racist.
Do you need to decide what you're gonna do? Because you said you're looking for like 10 different ones.
I know because I realized I couldn't do turn back.
Don't hurt me.
I don't think Jane stopped recording.
Yo.
You're just gonna hear.
Yeah, she definitely. Because she's the best.
It actually has my name on it.
Has our name on what?
In the middle of the lecture, I made yours and I made yours, and I'm just like, bro, where's mine? Bro, where's mine? Chill out, give me 1 second.
Where's mine? No, he decided to.
What is that the problem?
You know what it is.
What is it?
It's something inappropriate. I should probably shouldn't. Sorry.
You're just gonna wear it on your chest like that?
It's the Scarlet Witch.
No, we didn't finish yet. Jane's taking a 2-minute bathroom break.
This started 15 minutes late.
I'm confused what's wrong with it.
I'm confused about everything.
Okay.
I'm just like,
I feel like it will click for you when you start building your projects. You should probably just start with that instead of like.
Yeah, definitely. That's like the first layer. So, I feel like once you start getting it,
Yeah.
once you see it work like once.
You can just start like this weekend building few small apps in Redux, and then on Monday when you see the lectures, you do. I don't know.
bro, can you just say the connect one time?
Why?
What?
I don't get it though. Why? Say it.
Show him the video.
Say it. Say it.
No, I won't.
Say it.
No. It's something super funny. It's just a stupid guy that was promoting a fake cryptocurrency.
Guys,
And now
ready
he's trying-
to finish out this bug?
I'm sorry, I'm such
Okay.
too immature for this.
So, mapping state. What are we putting here?
Dude, I don't know. I don't even know why we're doing this.
Because we no longer have this dot state dot selected player. Our selected player lives in the store.
Okay.
So, what do we put here to have access to selected player?
Selected player. But we also need to wrap it in parentheses.
We do. And where does this come from?
State.selected player.
Great.
So
And
we can get
then-
rid of this stuff, right?
We can. Are we importing connect?
No.
No.
Impure.
Hmm?
Import.
You can do that? I don't think I can do that.
Okay.
Okay. We're importing that. We gotta do something here. What do we usually do here?
Connect. Map state to props, yo.
Map state to props, yo.
And then
Yeah. So what can I change this to?
the brackets and then the selected player.
Where are we mapping this to?
Map state.
We're mapping it to props.
That-
This is a class component, so we still keep the this. And the other components, if you'll recall, it was just functional components, so we didn't have the this. So we just do this props. We check if selected player is null or a real thing. If it's null, like it's a falsy value, then it's going to say
So,
click for player details.
You know why it wasn't working earlier?
Because it was only doing the first half, right? Yeah, makes sense. And now we don't need to pass selected player, right?
Oh, we do.
Why?
Oh, okay.
Why don't we need to pass selected
But
player?
then that means we don't need map state to props either.
We need map state to props just because we're doing this check here, so we're checking something on the props. We don't need to pass selected player. Why not?
Because it already is.
So we don't need to pass selected player because the whole flow is that in player, you click on a player name. On click, this happens. So this is me clicking on a player name, right? On click, we dispatch this action. So dispatch, it carries a message, just like select player. Goes to the reducer, which is the bouncer. First it goes here. This is the function that we're dispatching. It returns this action that has a type and a payload. Then this action goes to the reducer. The reducer is like, let me check my cases, yo. It finds select player. It's like, okay, you're legit. I'll change the state. I won't mutate it. I'll keep state the way it was. I'll overwrite selected player to whatever key payload is on action. And you can also call this player as long as you match it inside of wherever you define that action. So like in here, you can call it player. So that's like the other way of doing it. So it works. Is there anything else we want to get rid of?
This team was passing down.
I'm going to get rid of this because maybe this will confuse you guys later. Team list. Is it passing down a player?
Select that player.
It's passing down select player.
Team.js maybe is passing the player.
This is passing this. I have a question for you guys. We want to keep this the way it is. Why? We want to still pass player as props the regular old React way. Why?
Wait, what?
Because we still want to give it an object of a player so that we can assess value. I mean,
Yeah.
only team is from like this state, but now that we're mapping the
Yeah.
store, but now that we're mapping over that array, like we still want to be able to like
Exactly.
give it a prop of the player.
So the question was, as you can see, I'm removing a bunch of props because we have a store now. We don't need to be passing stuff through props. And the question was that here I actually want to keep this player as a prop when I map over the team's players. Why would I want to keep this as a prop?
Because it's not
Oh.
Yeah, there's not really a good way to put this on the stage. So like when you're mapping over an array of a bunch of things, it's still good practice to pass each of those things the regular old React way. Because what would even be a good way to put every single player on the stage? Alright, so this works. Everything's working the way it was before.
Less.
Don't have much else to add. You guys can go through these notes. Where's the readme? There's some more extra stuff here. But that's basically the flow of doing Redux. You gotta have your store, gotta wrap a provider around your highest level component and give it the store. You have a reducer that has an initial state. You have your bouncer, the reducer that defines the cases and tells you how the state will change for each of those cases. And you could have this as a string, but it's usually better to have like as a variable because it's stronger, so you get better errors. You define your action types if you're choosing the route of having these be variables, and then you definitely have to define action creators no matter what if you're going to try to write to the state or like change the state in any way. And then your action creators will return an object that has your type and your payload. And this variable you can call whatever you want. So you can call it player, or if there's a case where you're getting a bunch of players, you can call it players. That's it. That's Redux.
Hey, can I ask a question?
What's up?
Does Redux go like more in depth? Like, are there
Yeah.
levels?
There are interesting levels to it. So we have one reducer. There's actually ways to combine reducers and make multiple reducer files. Yeah.
Will you ever have more than one store?
Yes.
I
No,
haven't
just took a guess.
come into a situation where you have more than one store, because usually your store is your single source of truth that has everything. I've seen multiple reducers and stuff. Usually by model, it makes sense to have like a reducer. So if you have a model for like reviews, maybe you'll have a different set of like reducer stuff for that model versus a different model. And then you merge those reducers together using combined reducers. And then you also are going to learn about thunks, which is a way to send fetch requests. So then like your action creators will have your dispatch and they will send a thunk, which is like another function, and that's like another layer of complexity. But this is enough for now to get started.
Yeah, I just want to say I learned so much.
Really? I'm glad. I did too.
Hey.
How do I turn this off? I hope it was
Another
recording.
excellent chain lecture.
Thank you.
Gotcha,
I don't,
guys.
guys, I don't know what happened, but I don't see the recording. Oh.